All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas, and I do educational material on this channel. Mostly, I get into um, theories of everything, and mostly theories of everything that you've never heard of or you don't know too much about. Maybe you've heard of it, but you don't know what it refers to. Today is the 142nd video that I've done on the reciprocal system of theory, which is a theory that was invented by Dewey B. Larson. And it's not really just a theory, it's a system of theory, meaning that it can be, it's a system. So if you understand the system, you can plug it into any subject that you like. So it is a true theory of everything. Anything is under the scope of the reciprocal system, except for, I guess, the actual creation of the universe. Everything after the creation of the universe is fair game for the reciprocal system. And Larson died back in 1990, but his ideas are being carried forward by a few courageous souls. And some advances have been made, but the theory does, it is, it has to be, I'm here to keep it going because there aren't too many people who know about it, and I think it's very important. The main thing that I like about it, not only does it provide answers, and not only does it answer questions and ask questions, but it also empowers the user, because the user is no longer dependent upon the mad scientists, working for big tech or big military or whatever they are, that are big medicine that will tell you what you're supposed to believe. You can approach these subjects yourself and come up with answers that are more accurate, more trustworthy, and free. So that's why I like it. The basic idea behind Larson's system is that we live in a universe of motion, not a universe of matter, but not a universe of energy, but a universe of motion. And today we're reading from his 1979 book, Nothing But Motion. This book is mostly on physics and a little bit of organic chemistry. And we're in chapter 3 that's called Reference Systems. And this is actually, we don't have to go into a great deal of detail on the theory itself, because he's going to get right into it. Larson starts out, his first inklings into the theory started in about 1930, but it took him about 25 years to work it out, where he boiled it down to really two fundamental postulates. And he took those two fundamental postulates and he deduced an entire theoretical universe from those postulates. And right here in chapter 3, he's about to unveil the two postulates. And so we'll start with his two postulates, and then we'll see where he goes from there. First fundamental postulate: the physical universe is composed entirely of one component, motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. Second fundamental postulate: the physical universe conforms to the relations of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its primary magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. Postulates are justified by their consequences, not by their antecedents, And as long as they are rational and mutually consistent, there is not much that can be said about them, either favorably or adversely. It should be of interest, however, to note that the concept of a universe composed entirely of motion is the only new idea that is involved in the postulates that define the reciprocal system. There are other ideas which, on the basis of current thinking, could be considered unorthodox, but these are by no means new. For example, the postulates include the assumption that the geometry of the universe is Euclidean. This is in direct conflict with present-day physical theory, which assumes a non-Euclidean geometry, but it certainly cannot be regarded as an innovation. On the contrary, the physical validity of Euclidean geometry was accepted without question for thousands of years, and there is little doubt but that non-Euclidean geometry would still be nothing but a mathematical curiosity had it not been for the fact that the development of physical theory encountered some serious difficulties which the theorists were unable to surmount within the limitations established by Euclidean geometry, absolute magnitudes, etc. Motion is measured as speed or velocity, inasmuch as the quantity of space involved in 1 unit of motion is the minimum quantity that takes part in any physical activity, because less than 1 unit of motion does not exist. This is the unit of space. Similarly, the quantity of time involved in the 1 unit of motion is the unit of time. Each unit of motion, then, consists of 1 unit of space in association with 1 unit of time. That is, the basic motion of the universe is motion at unit speed. Cosmologists often begin their analyses of large-scale physical processes with a consideration of a hypothetical empty universe, one in which no matter exists in the postulated space-time setting. But an empty universe of motion is an impossibility. Without motion, there would be no universe. The most primitive condition, the situation which prevails when the universe of motion exists, but nothing at all is happening in that universe, is a condition in which units of motion exist independently, with no interaction. In this condition, all speed is unity, 1 unit of space per 1 unit of time. And since all units of motion are alike, they have no property but speed. And that is unity for all. Unity for all. The entire universe is a featureless uniformity. In order that there may be physical phenomena that can be observed or measured, there must be some deviation from this one-to-one relation. And since it is the deviation that is observable, the amount of the deviation is a measure of the magnitude of the phenomena. Thus, all physical activity, all change that occurs in the system of motions that constitutes the universe extends from unity, not from zero. The units of space, time, and motion that form the background for physical activity are simply scalar magnitudes. As matters now stand, we have no geometric means of representation that will express all 3 magnitudes coincidentally. But if we assume that the time progression continues at a uniform rate, and we measure this progression by some independent device, a clock, then we can represent the corresponding spatial magnitude by a 1-dimensional geometrical figure, a line. The length of this line represents the amount of space corresponding to a given time magnitude. Where this time magnitude is unity, the length of the line also represents the speed, the space per unit time. In present-day scientific practice, the datum from which all speed measurements are made. The point identified with the mathematical zero is some stationary point in the reference system. But, as has been explained, the reference datum for physical magnitudes in a universe of motion is not zero speed, but unit speed. The natural datum is therefore continually moving outward in the direction of greater magnitudes from the conventional zero datum. And the true speeds that are effective in the basic physical interactions can be correctly measured only in terms of deviation upward or downward from unity. From the natural standpoint, a motion at unit speed is no effective motion at all. Expressing this in another way, we may say that the natural system of reference, the reference system to which the physical universe actually conforms, is moving outward at unit speed with respect to any stationary spatial reference system. Any identifiable portion of such a stationary reference system is called a location in that system. While less than unit quantities of space do not exist, points within the units can be identified. A spatial location may therefore be of any size, from a point to the amount of space occupied by a galaxy, depending on the context in which the term is used. To distinguish locations in the natural moving system of reference from locations in the stationary reference systems, we will use the term absolute location in application to the natural system. In the context of a fixed reference system, an absolute location appears as a point or some finite spatial magnitude moving along a straight line. We are so accustomed to referring motion to a stationary reference system that it seems almost self-evident that an object that has no independent motion and is not subject to any external force must remain stationary with respect to some spatial coordinate system. Of course, it is recognized that what seems to be motionless in the context of our ordinary experience is actually moving in terms of the solar system as a reference. What seems to be stationary in the solar system is moving if we use the galaxy as a reference datum, and so on. Current scientific theory also contends that motion cannot be specified in any absolute manner and can only be stated in relative terms. However, all previous thought on the subject, irrespective of how it views the details, has made the assumption that the initial point of a motion is some fixed spatial location that can be identified as the spatial zero. But nature is not required to conform to human opinions and beliefs, and in this case does not do so. As indicated in the preceding paragraphs, the natural system of reference in a universe of motion is not a stationary system, but a moving system. Inasmuch as each unit of the basic motion involves 1 unit of space and 1 unit of time, it follows that continuation of the motion through an interval during which time is progressing involves a continued increase or progression of both space and time. If an absolute spatial location x is in coincidence with spatial location lowercase x at time t, then at time t plus n, in this absolute location, capital X, will be found at spatial location x plus n. As seen in the context of a stationary spatial system of reference, each absolute location is moving outward from its point of reference at a constant unit speed. Because of this motion of the natural reference system with respect to the stationary systems, an object that has no independent motion and is not subject to any external force does not remain stationary in any system of fixed spatial coordinates. It remains at the same absolute location and therefore moves outward at unit speed from its initial location and from any object that occupies such a location. Thus far, we have been considering the progression of the natural moving reference system in the context of a one-dimensional spatial reference system. Since we have postulated that the universe is three-dimensional, we may also represent the progression in a three-dimensional stationary reference system. Because the progression is scalar, what this accomplishes is merely to place the one-dimensional system that has been discussed in the preceding paragraphs into a certain position in the three-dimensional coordinate system. The outward movement of the natural system with respect to the fixed point continues in the same one-dimensional manner. The scalar nature of the progression of the natural reference system is very significant. A unit of the basic motion has no inherent direction. It is simply a unit of space in association with a unit of time. In quantitative terms, it is a unit scalar magnitude, a unit of speed. Scalar motion plays only a very minor role in everyday life, and little attention is ordinarily paid to it. But our finding is that the basic motion of the physical universe is inherently scalar, changes this picture drastically. The properties of scalar motion now become extremely important. To illustrate the primary difference between a scalar motion and the vectorial motion of our ordinary experience, let us consider two cases which involve a moving object x between 2 points A and B on the surface of a balloon. In the first case, let us assume that the size of the balloon is maintained constant and that the object x is something capable of independent motion, a crawling insect perhaps. The motion of x is then vectorial. It has a specific direction in the context of a stationary spatial reference system. And if that direction is BA, that is, x is moving away from B, the distance XA decreases and the distance XB increases. In the second case, we will assume that x is a fixed spot on the balloon surface and that its motion is due to an expansion of the balloon. Here, the motion of x is scalar. It is simply outward, away from all other points on the balloon surface, and has no specific direction. In this case, the motion away from B does not increase the distance XA. Both XB and XA increase. The motion of the natural reference system relative to any fixed spatial system of reference is motion of this character. It has a positive scalar magnitude, but no inherent direction. In order to place the one-dimensional progression of an absolute location in a three-dimensional coordinate system, it is necessary to define a reference point and a direction. In the subsequent discussion, we will be dealing largely with scalar motions that originate at specific points in the fixed coordinate system. The reference point for each of these motions is the point of origin. It follows that the motions can be represented in the conventional fixed system of reference only by the use of multiple reference points. This was brought out in the first edition of this work in the form of a statement that photons travel outward in all directions from various points of emission. However, experience has indicated that further elaboration of this point is necessary in order to avoid misunderstandings. The principal stumbling block seems to be a widespread impression that there must be some kind of a conceptually identifiable universal reference system to which the motions of photons and other objects that remain in the same absolute locations can be related. The expression natural system of reference probably contributes to this impression, but the fact that a natural reference system exists does not necessarily imply that it must be related in any direct way to the conventional three-dimensional stationary frame of reference. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Now, I recognize that this is super abstract and very difficult to follow. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of Larson's system right here that I just read in the last 15-20 minutes. And, you know, I would recommend listening to this over and over, going real slow, taking the time to do the visualizations that he puts in here. And, you know, the algebra with the X's and the Y's can be very confusing, but this is how you're going to understand this theory, is by getting it on this, exactly on this level. So we might go over this a little bit more tomorrow, or maybe we'll just get to the end of the chapter and then go over it more slowly. But just hang in there, keep working, and thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.